Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss how another British-based manufacturer, really Vauxhall this time, has called on the government to renegotiate the Brexit deal because they're about to be screwed over big time by our old friend Brexit reality in the guise of rules of origin. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So let's begin by explaining quickly the lie about our trade deal with the EU. See, Boris Johnson claimed that it was a tariff-free deal. This was misleading, a couple of reasons. First, there are many non-tariff trade barriers that he raised, which are screwing with both our manufacturing as well as general supply chains. But second, the trade deal isn't actually really tariff-free. There is a tariff-free component to it, but it only applies to exported goods meeting the rules of origin, as is typical for free trade agreements around the world. The agreement can also slap tariffs even on these goods if we diverge more than agreed on standards, which is something that a lot of Brexiteers want. But that's another issue. Rules of origin for now. We can only export goods to the EU tariff-free if they're considered to have been made in the UK. In practical terms, this means basically half the components, materials, workmanship has been sourced in the UK. Now that is to stop other third countries, without such a deal with the EU, manufacturing products, sending them to a warehouse in Britain, getting someone to slap a Made in UK sticker on them, and then sell them to the EU tariff-free. No, not happening. It's also worth bearing in mind that even if your produced goods meet the requirements, you've still got a lot of red tape coming your way to prove it. So even for goods that can be exported tariff-free, there are still administrative costs, reducing the competitiveness compared to being made in the single market. This latest issue in the news is because the owner of Vauxhall, Stellantis, has said that they won't be able to export their electric cars to the EU single market tariff-free from January due to being unable to meet the rules of origin. As a little aside, there's been a few interesting developments about the failure of British Volt, which was supposed to spearhead our UK electric car industry, but that'll be another one. But anyway, they can at the moment. This company can export them tariff-free at the moment due to the phased nature of Brexit. Remember, we didn't get Brexit all in one go. Even COVID and Putin would not have provided enough cover for the damage if we had. So we're phasing it in piece by piece, letting people get used to the stench before releasing another miasma of Brexit upon us, in the hopes that we just keep acclimatising to the lower standards of living like a frog in a boiling pot and never really notice. Essentially, Stellantis want the government to negotiate an extension to the current arrangements. This will not be easy. Might not even be possible. Consider that the EU gain advantage from British goods not being sold in the single market tariff-free. See, let's say you're in the market for an electric car, saying you live in Belgium. This year, you may have bought one that happened to be manufactured in Britain. Well, if the same person just had waited another year for 2024, they'll now find that the British manufactured car is more expensive because 10% tariff slapped on it. The cars manufactured in the EU are now more competitively priced by comparison. So the EU market customers are now way more likely to buy cars from EU manufacturers. And it's not immediately clear why the EU would want to give up this competitive advantage just because Rishi Sunak does some puppy eyes. And if you're thinking that, well, maybe the EU would get a reciprocal arrangement, they'd benefit from their trade in reverse, think again. You may imagine that these new rules coming online will make it harder for EU manufacturers to supply the British market tariff-free. They won't. The reason why these cars will not meet rules of origin is because Britain is not currently able to sustain the manufacturing base to supply enough raw materials and components in order to produce a car where half of it is considered to be produced in the UK. And Britain will never be able to do this competitively. And that is because manufacturing is much more efficient if supply chains are spread across multiple countries. It's sort of an extension of economies of scale. See, there might be a component, a specialised component, which is needed in such small numbers that it is most cost effective if you have just one or two factories on the entire continent manufacturing them. You know, if you were to have a factory in every single country on the continent manufacturing them, economies of scale don't work in its favour. So you have like one or two factories. And this will be the case for a lot of specialised components needed in the manufacture of, well, electric cars in this case, but anything really. So there's no competitive way for Britain to host all of these factories or even enough of them. But of course, the EU single market comprises almost every country on the entire continent. So the EU can easily have the supply chains to be able to meet rules of origin competitively to export to Britain tariff-free. This is a completely one-sided problem. And it is not clear to me how we would persuade the EU to screw over their own businesses without us offering something to compensate. And what are we going to offer? Bottom line is that this is in the interests of the EU. It's in their interest for British manufacturing to decline in general, and for the demand left by that decline to be met by an expansion of manufacturing in the EU. And this is just the latest company to bemoan the Brexit deal we have. It is affecting not even just manufacturers in Britain, but producers in general. As soon as we left the single market, what were the government doing? The Tory government were advising British businesses to get around the trade barriers they'd just raised by simply shifting some or all of their investment to EU countries, which many did. So that's jobs disappearing over to the EU. That is taxes being collected in the EU. We have lost trade in both goods and services, including the coveted financial services, to EU centres. All trading blocs exist to empower their own members. That's why the blocs exist. It's the price for membership. It's what makes it worthwhile. We abandoned it. And I want you to take note of something here. The owners of this car producer are not saying, oh, this is disappointing, but never mind, at least we have access to the CPTPP now. No, their statement specifically says that the UK's global car manufacturing competitiveness is being hit by rules of origin. They don't say European manufacture, but global. In other words, if they get anything from the CPTPP deal at all, and it's not clear if they really do, then it is peanuts compared to what they are losing as a result of the UK exiting the EU. Apart from anything else, how long do you think it would take to get shipments of components from Japan as opposed to France? To be efficient and competitive, manufacturing needs to be part of a just-in-time supply chain. They need to be able to order components just a few days before they need them in order to avoid the need for excessive storage, but also wastage, because they need to know, so how many of these things do we need? This is not possible with Pacific supply chains when we're not in the Pacific. Our manufacturers need to be part of the supply chain network on our doorstep. Now, we've already lost access to the just-in-time supply chain because even when tariffs aren't involved, it's now much more complex and time-consuming to move goods between Britain and the rest of Europe. Trying to do the same thing with countries spread all around the largest ocean on the planet, that is a non-starter. And a final thing to consider is the impact on investment. So if we just get our old faithful again, the Financial Times demonstrated some time ago that investment in the UK was hit the second the Brexit referendum was announced. Years before we knew what Brexit would be, investment was suddenly flatlining instead of growing as it had before. Why is that? Investors need to know years into the future what the lay of the land's going to be. And Britain at that point suddenly became less attractive as a place to do business. It's not that there's no business opportunities, it's not that there's no investment, but that investment has effectively been cut in half. If you want to set up a factory somewhere in Europe, say, to supply the European market, it used to be the case that the UK would be a very attractive place to do so. Business friendly, sometimes a little bit too much, and with free access to the continental market. This is the reason why the UK used to attract the most foreign inward investment of all EU countries. Not anymore. If you produce something in Britain now, you've got a hard time getting skilled workers, you've got a hard time getting certain supplies, and you've got a hard time selling to Europe. Whereas if you set up that factory in, say, Belgium or Ireland or France, you have access to the continental labour market, the continental just-in-time supply chain, and free access to sell to the continental market. You even have an easier time selling to Britain from the EU than from Britain to the EU. So it's not even like you're choosing between the large single market and the British market. You can still sell to both. And you can still sell to both tariff-free, because you will be able to meet your rules of origins when you're basing your factory in Belgium, and therefore sell to Britain tariff-free. You can still sell to... There'll be a bit more paperwork involved, but you can still sell to us. No tariffs. Because it's the EU that got a real tariff-free trade deal, not Britain. And this is not the first tale of woe from a British-based producer, and it will not be the last. It will mean fewer well-paid jobs, more expensive goods, and being left behind in the new climate emergency era of industrialisation. Even if we come to our collective senses quickly, Brexit is going to have screwed us for a great many years to come. And we have yet to come to our senses collectively. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.